Welcome everyone to the first of many rants, and we're going to start off with the major topic, but before we do, I just want to say something as this is my first video and I don't want people to get the wrong idea. This is not a news or political commentary channel, it's simply a place where I rant on whichever topic crosses my mind, and no topic is off limits. Within reason, of course, we're on YouTube. You may agree or disagree with me, and that's totally okay. I appreciate your time nonetheless.
Are you calling me? I'm right.
So today we're going to talk about Donald Trump and some of the executive orders he has signed into office in his first week as the 47th president. I should preface this by stating that I dislike both Trump and Kamala, and that it should have been Bernie since 2016. Bernie is my guy. The Democratic Party is a mess that eats their own, and the Republican Party has gone on the fringe. Both of these parties are unrecognizable compared to their previous behavior and policies from just even 20 years ago. Now with that out of the way, let's talk about these executive orders. We'll start with one that I didn't think was real because of how insignificant it is, and that's the renaming of the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America, and Mount Denali, or Denali, back to Mount McKinley. Why is this here? The Gulf of Mexico has been the Gulf of Mexico for longer than the United States has existed. And why would any other nation on Earth accept this change? It doesn't make anything easier, and it doesn't do anything for anyone. What does it exactly accomplish for the US? Now, Mount McKinley, I don't mind as much, because I grew up with it. But again, it begs the question, why? I like the name Denali. I think it's a pretty cool name. But if I was a betting man, I'd wager most Americans couldn't pick McKinley from a crowd, or even know what his first name is. So it just seems like a giant waste of time. Next, we got Birthright Citizenship, and it's on the chopping block, which is surprising since it's protected by the Constitution. Trump signed an executive order to get rid of it, and it's already being challenged by the courts. This one's interesting because for a time, I was a major supporter of birthright citizenship. It just made sense to me. You're born here, you get to live here. It was pretty simple. But as I got older, I learned more about how other countries operate, and I noticed most of them don't actually have birthright citizenship, or at least have some restriction on it. This usually requires at least one parent to hold citizenship or be a permanent resident of the country. So I guess I'm okay with them changing it, but I just don't think it will change much for the average American. It definitely impacts immigrants, which I guess is the goal for most nations that have these restrictions. But I think the immigration crisis, as the Republicans are calling it, is pretty overblown in the US. Most illegal immigrants do pay taxes, they work for less than minimum wage, and they do work that most people don't want to do, like most of the farming jobs, at least here in California. The idea that the horde of criminals are pouring into the US is just not founded in reality. Do some bad guys get in? Of course, and we should deport them. But to make it seem like the majority of these crossings are a danger to the US citizen is basic fear-mongering. Surprisingly, Trump revoked the mandate Biden signed that pushed for at least 50% of all vehicles bought in 2030 to be electric. Now, I would have assumed, since Elon's pretty much a butt buddy with Trump, that this wouldn't have been on the radar, but it seems like global warming is fiction to most of the people on the right. I could show all the data and the graphs, but it doesn't really matter. Most people don't look at the data. Yes, I know, the Earth goes through periodic cycles of heating and cooling. We can still see that mankind is having an accelerated effect on the climate. But back on topic. Personally, I don't know many people buying gas guzzlers. Most of my friends and family are buying hybrids and electric vehicles at this point. I did have a thought that it's possible that maybe this ban is to convince automakers not to invest into researching EVs and allow Tesla to be the only, sheriff in town, at least in the US. Now, China, for all its pollution, is actually killing it in the EV research and development department. If you haven't seen their EVs, please do yourself a favor and look them up. They're actually insane. And if it wasn't for all the sales tariffs and lack of distribution networks, I'm pretty sure we'd be all driving Chinese branded or Chinese made EVs. Some of them are going for as little as $7,500, which makes them incredibly affordable, compared to most entry-level American EVs starting at around $30,000 for the most budget model. And no, these aren't built terribly. I know that there was a stereotype that Chinese manufacturing was awful, but they have improved immensely, especially in the manufacturing of their cars. Now on to Trump's threat towards Panama, Greenland, and even Canada. which I think is mostly a joke. I think he's trying to piss off Trudeau. But again, why the hard-on for Greenland? There really isn't much there. I know it's rich in natural resources, but it's completely covered in ice that it's going to take many, many, many years for the ice to thaw out and the natural resources to be available to us. Additionally, the population is pretty small, and like I mentioned, gains are insignificant in terms of the economy. But my national security, you know? I know that's going to be said in the comments. Let me just say this right now. We outspend the next 10 or so countries combined in defense spending. Of all defense spending in the world, the US amounts to, I believe, around 30-something odd percent of it. That's 1/3 of the entire world. We're not under threat, and definitely not because we don't have Greenland. Okay? Now, Trump's statements about Panama are straight up lies. It was one of the most expensive government projects today. That is true. But that's probably where the truth ends. 35,000 Americans did not die building it. Hell, I think the figure's closer to around 300 Americans. Most of the people that died building the Panama Canal were actually French, and they abandoned the project because it was going to bankrupt the country. Now, don't get me wrong, America did a great thing for trade all around the world, but there isn't some conspiracy to screw over the US through the Panama Canal. China doesn't own it, and doesn't get special treatment. Like I've said, we've benefited tremendously and continue to do so. So why are we acting like Americans are being screwed over by Panama? Can most Americans even point out Panama on the map? Now, I saw an image going around about how 100+ million Americans are going to be affected by higher drug prices because Trump removed the caps on them. This just isn't true. Trump revoked Biden's order. That is true. But that isn't the same as removing the Inflation Reduction Act, which is what is actually responsible for the capped prices on some drugs like insulin. Now, what actually happened was that Trump revoked further expansion of the program that Biden signed, which was to find new ways to deliver their services. He may do this to make his own plan, I don't know, or just to show that he likes that he got one over on Biden even though it changes effectively nothing. What I would love to see is all this healthcare crap go to the wayside and have universal healthcare for all American citizens. Why are we even discussing healthcare plan this, insurance that? No, get rid of the entire system and just give citizens a simple, fair system. I'm so tired of reading about healthcare issues in this country. We can afford it, and for most people it would actually be cheaper. But I'm not going to go into it. That's for another video, maybe in the future. Now, the next one brings me back to when I first heard about Bitcoin as a teenager. Don't worry, I didn't want to spike my electricity bill, and I would have probably sold them even if I did have them when they hit $100. But for those not in the know, the Silk Road was a notorious website mainly used to purchase illegal products or services. It was one of the earliest markets that embraced the anonymity granted by Bitcoin. One of the founders was Ross Ulbricht. At the time of his arrest, the feds had found around 600,000 Bitcoin. In 2013, that same Bitcoin was worth millions. But nowadays, it's enough to land you on the list of the top 25 richest people in the world. This was the first big case regarding crypto and its usage as a vehicle for crime, and I believe the government wanted to make an example out of him. He was given 2 life sentences plus 40 years for, let me see my notes, creating a website that allowed people to trade using crypto. Now, I know I'm being facetious, right? But I just don't believe the punishment fits the crime. And I actually agree with Trump's pardon here. Ross is about 40 years old now, and even though he served quite a bit of time, if he managed to stash some of that Bitcoin away, he's going to be living beyond comfortably for the rest of his life. Now, one pardon that I don't agree with is the pardon of the January 6th rioters. It sits terribly with me that this idea that you can display your allegiance to like a particular political candidate, do illegal things under their name, and then be absolved of it if your candidate manages to win the election. It sets a dangerous precedent, and we should not be praising the release of people who were convinced enough to storm the Capitol because their favorite overlord and messiah, Donald Trump, lost the election. Now, I'm not going to go into details about how each person did this or each person's crime or their sentencing in particular, because I'm sure there's some people that got charged unjustly, but that doesn't make me feel like everyone should be pardoned. The people committed the crime willingly, putting into question the legitimacy of the election process and completely ignoring the importance of the peaceful transfer of power. Now, again, I'm not a Democrat, but I can't imagine the party reacting the same way as the Republicans did that day. Yes, they complain a lot, they throw tantrums, but at least they don't try to undo the underlying fabric of the American Republic. The next one's probably going to get me into a little bit of trouble by the quote-unquote woke mob, and probably deserves a video on the topic itself, so I'll just try to keep it short. And I will say I'm not anti-trans and I have no hate towards the LGBT community. Now, one of Trump's executive orders declares sex as an individual, immutable biological classification as either male or female, and states that gender identity cannot be included in the definition of sex, and that sex and gender cannot be used interchangeably. Now, I will agree that humans are naturally binary in sex, barring the extremely rare genetic abnormalities such as intersex. I would also say, however, that decoupling gender and sex has caused more issues than it actually has solved. Growing up in the 90s, everyone used man and woman interchangeably for male and female. They were basically synonyms. I think this decoupling of it has caused the big divide we see today, where people are arguing over each other because they can't agree on definitions. To me, what people consider gender, I see as part of someone's personality traits, and are unique to each person, so it kind of fails as an identifier for society. Do you want to wear a dress but you're a male? Go for it. Never want to wear a dress but are female? Again, go for it. But these actions do not make you any less or any more of a male or female, man or woman. Now, if you're trans and you feel dysphoric about your body, do whatever you need to do and try to feel comfortable in your own body. That's a given. But also understand that you cannot force or convince people to treat you as the opposite sex when you are not of that sex. Hiding behind social norms or terms does not actually help your case, because for so many people, gender and sex are still the same thing. Now, that's all I will say about the gender or sex political topic for now, and we'll probably make a rant video alone for this topic, but I want to make it clear that if you intend to bully or berate someone just because they're trans, you are still an asshole. The next one is the removal of DEI-focused programs or initiatives from the government. I think DEI is this generation's affirmative action. I think most of these programs start out as honest initiatives, but soon after get radicalized or pushed into more extreme versions of itself. I understand the logic of opening opportunities for underrepresented groups, even if some people think discrimination is a thing of the past. But diversity for the sake of diversity is a bit too forced for most people and leaves some with resentment. They may think they didn't get hired over someone else because of uncontrollable factors and become radicalized, rather than just accept that someone else got the job. Now, I'm kind of glad that a lot of companies are actually showing their true colors and stop virtue signaling for brownie points online. Maybe now people will see that their beloved companies don't actually care about much other than making more money every year. Last but not least, the TikTok ban delay. I don't personally use TikTok, so seeing some people lose their minds over it was a little amusing, but this is all for show. The reasoning behind the ban isn't anything other than greed. It has nothing to do with the app causing the attention span of its users to dwindle and absolutely frying their dopamine. The government could care less. It only cares about the fact that TikTok is the biggest player in the social media space and happens to be from China. They want access to the data and to dominate the social media space by having an American company oversee its operations in the US. That's about it. I don't know how Trump is getting away with the flip-flopping on this issue when he began his first presidency with an executive order to ban the app. Now he suddenly loves it? Nah, I'm not buying it. He realized its importance in the election and noticed that many of his supporters loved the app. Now he wants to play hero, and it's going to work because his rabid fan base will allow this man to get away with anything. Even if I don't use the app, I don't think it should be banned. As much as I think that short-form content is a plague on society, it's here to stay, whether it's TikTok, YouTube Shorts, or Instagram Reels. Now that's it for this rant. If you like this content, don't forget to like and subscribe, it really helps. And I'll see you guys on the next one. Cheers.